Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse Wieland. I'm the Associate Director at the Office of National Fellowships. Today, we're going to be talking about the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship. We have some fantastic panelists with us today to talk about their experiences studying abroad and where they are now. But just a brief introduction from my team at ONF. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Beal. My pronouns are he, they. I am the program coordinator at the Office of National Fellowships, and I am also a Gilman advisor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bonnie Garcia Glockner. I'm the Assistant Director for ONF, and I am also an advisor for Gilman.
Perfect. So let me pull up our quick Gilman presentation, and then y'all can let me know that you can actually see it. So wait, here we are. Hold on one second. Tech competency is at an all-time low. I do apologize, but here we go. Can everyone see this slide? Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, perfect. So I already kind of introduced the Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarship. This is an opportunity that was created to help students that receive federal Pell Grants pursue international study. So kind of the quick and dirty is that it's up to $5,000 that you can apply towards a program of your choosing. That can be a more traditional study program, like I'm taking classes abroad. It can be in relation to a research project, an internship opportunity, a cultural engagement or exchange opportunity. Gilman is extremely flexible with what you're allowed to do, but they do like to see in some ways, how does this opportunity connect to your academic, your personal, your professional goals? And how is this opportunity going to move you forward during your time at Florida State or beyond? So the base level Gilman scholarship, like I said, is up to $5,000 towards any program, but then Gilman does have some very specific caveats. And so if your program is focused on foreign language study, you can see at the bottom of this slide, these are the languages, according to Gilman, that are of critical need. But if you are studying that language through your program, you can qualify for up to $8,000 in total funding to apply towards your program. And just recently, this past year, they've added a supplemental STEM award, which could qualify you for up to $6,000. And for both of those, the critical need and the supplemental STEM award, there was just one short additional essay that you would need to write. But regardless, our office, the Office of National Fellowships, we are here to help you through that application process. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we are here to review your essays, help you manage all the materials that you need and make sure that you meet that deadline, the first one being in early October. Now, the eligibility for Gilman is really straightforward. U.S. citizenship, you need to be in good academic standing. I have never had a student with an issue related to that, but that's something we can talk about one-on-one if you are concerned. You need to be receiving a federal Pell Grant either during the application cycle or during when your program starts. Because many students will apply the semester or multiple semesters before their program starts. You do not need to be yet accepted into the program that you plan to participate in. Gilman understands that these timelines don't always line up perfectly. So as long as you can submit to them a plan for this is where I plan to go, this is what I hope to do, and this is the impact I hope it has on me, that is more than enough to apply quote unquote early, because you can apply this coming October, say for an upcoming summer experience. One opportunity I did not mention, the Gilman McCain Scholarship. It is exactly the same as the standard Gilman Scholarship, but it is not Pell specific. As long as you qualify for any financial aid, you are fine. You just need to be the dependent of an active duty, need to be the spouse of or the child of an active duty military member to qualify for that award. The selection criteria, another benefit of working with the Office of National Fellowships is both myself and Bonnie have served multiple times, and Sam will soon, as a Gilman reviewer. And so we have selected applications based on the criteria at the bottom of this slide. academic preparedness. Are you ready for this experience that you are proposing? Diversity of background and experience. That is a catch-all for Gilman wants to know about you and who you are, where you come from, what are your experiences prior to or during college. It helps round out your application. In terms of destination, Gilman is open to any country that is listed as a level 1 or 2 according to the U.S. Department of State. Again, something we could talk more about in a one-on-one, but Gilman does have preferences for regions that are under accessed by American Study Abroad students. And those regions are Eastern Europe, the continent of Africa, and Southeast Asia, regions where most American students don't study. If you do find a program there, that it's like a small plus to your application. And impact to community is both the community you are going to and the community you are returning to. And so how are you going to engage with the people, the place, and the culture? And then how are you going to share or apply what you've learned in the community that you return to? Some people define that as Florida State, others define that as their former high school, others define that, again, related to their field of study, other communities. And then the other optional criteria, of course, are if you are studying foreign language, if you are pursuing research. If you would like to use this QR code or take a quick photo, like that is totally fine. I'm not going to get into all of the nitty gritty, but essentially everyone that applies to Gilman has 3 essays to write with an optional 4th, depending on your program. 7,000 characters, what that equates to is about 1.5 pages. 3,000 is about maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of a page. So in total, you're writing about 2.5, at most 3 pages. And that is encompassing in essay 1, your program, where you're going, what you're doing, who you are, what your goals are. And then in the other essays, building mutual understanding, the follow-on service project, those are 2 sides of the same coin. 2 different sides of the same coin. One being the community you're going to. So how are you going to build that mutual understanding in that new community? And the follow-on project that is for you to define for when you return. Now, we can go over the timeline a little bit later, but long story short, Florida State has had a ton of success with the Gilman Scholarship over the years. We've had over 150 recipients study in over 40 different countries. And so we would love to talk to you about what your goals are, where you would like to go, and help you find a program that is appropriate and fits your needs. I have many, many years of data to show you that working with the Office of National Fellowships significantly increases your chances of being selected for this award. In fact, it nearly triples it. And so this application is not due until October, and then again in March. So we have plenty of time to talk about that. Feel free to follow us on social media. LinkedIn, Instagram are probably the most relevant places to follow us. Or feel free to reach out to myself, Bonnie, or Sam. We would be happy to set a time to speak with you in the coming weeks. So now the reason why we're all here, and let me stop my screen share really quickly. Actually, I'll take 10 minutes, better than yesterday's 11 minutes to talk about Gilman. And so I'm going to turn it over to our panelists and have them quickly introduce themselves. And so Charles, we'll start with you since you're the old man in the room. But if you could start by sharing your name, hometown, the degree that you earned at Florida State, and a little bit about where you are now.
Sure. So thank you so much, Jesse, for putting this all together. Again, my name is Charles Ford. I'm originally from Tampa, Florida. I studied, I got my bachelor's of science in biological sciences and psychology from Florida State University in 2018. I then went on to get my master's of public health from the University of South Florida and their College of Public Health. And I am currently an infection preventionist now at HCA Florida at one of the hospitals here in Miami. Prior to being at HCA, I was an epidemiologist at 2 different local departments of health during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I've had a numerous different experiences in public health. I'll leave it there.
I'm guessing if we're going in age order, I'm next. Hello, everybody. My name is Fania Jean. I am from Coral Springs, Florida. I earned a degree in international affairs and communications in 2019 from FSU. And then I moved to Washington, D.C., and I got my master's of public administration and certificate in nonprofit management from the George Washington University. And Currently, I am a program analyst for the Department of Insurance, the DC Department of Insurance, Security, and Banking, and I'm handling all of their diversity, equity, and inclusion needs. That's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Allen, and I am from Wauchula, Florida. I graduated from Florida State 2 months ago with my degree in psychology and biomathematics. And I'm currently in New Haven, Connecticut, where I will be starting my PhD in cognitive psychology at Yale in the fall.
Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself. Let's go ahead and just kind of get things started pretty easily and just kind of talk about your initial perceptions of studying abroad, at least when you arrived at Florida State. Was that something you were familiar with? Had you traveled previously? Or I guess, what did that mean to you when you first enrolled here?
So I guess I'll go start first. My initial perceptions, I had no idea what I was doing. I was a first generation college student. I had heard about Gilman word of mouth through some friends and some of the organizations I was a part of. And then once I started working with Jesse and ONF, they kind of helped me get an idea of what the application process was like. But it wasn't until I started with the Global Scholars Program at FSU that I started to learn more about, the what to prepare for with the Gilman experience. And I remember one of the, pivotal experiences that I had when I traveled abroad for the first time. Nobody had told me what a connecting flight was. So I learned very quickly what it means to leave or exit security in the airport and have to, kind of be told, no, your bag is going to be in Africa, but if you don't get there, you're not going to be with your bag. So it was a great initial learning experience for myself. There are some things that you can prepare as much as you think, but it's not until your boots on the ground and that you're actually living that experience that you can kind of get an idea of what studying abroad actually means.
I'm also first generation. So I feel like I don't even think I considered study abroad an option, just coming, getting my degree, etc. I think when it was presented in one of my classes, one of my classes, that's when I was like, oh, this is like available to all of us. And okay, we can actually do this. Like, this is a thing. We could leave and study. I think it was just me putting the pieces together where it's just like, this is something that is accessible to you. And then finding out how to do it, because that's always a process with it being your first time going abroad. I learned that, I missed all of the scholarship opportunities except for Gilman. And that's kind of how I made it possible. But just studying abroad, I didn't know it was an opportunity for me until I knew, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to agree with both of them. I initially didn't think that studying abroad was for me. And being a psychology major, there's this like London psychology program. And I always thought that that would be like a very fun thing to do, but I never considered it because like the cost of having to study abroad and knowing that I wouldn't be able to afford it. So when I first received an email about Gilman, at first I didn't think that like I qualified for it. And then it wasn't actually until like the next round that I actually read the email thoroughly, and I realized that I actually do qualify for it. So yeah.
Often, like, at least from my experience advising students on Gilman, what is most challenging is often not as much the application. It is literally just deciding, like, where do I want to go and what do I want to do and how much is that going to cost and how do I book a plane ticket? And so can you talk a little bit more about how you ultimately decided which country you wanted to study in? And then can you describe for us how you found the program and what your program was? I know that's a lot, so what country did you study in? How did you get there? What did you do once you got there?
So I studied, well, I didn't study, I did a pre-medical experience with the NGO in Ghana, Ghana specifically, Humanity and Community Development Project, HCDP Ghana. And I had heard about this organization from a previous Gilman scholar who had been there and went and had success. So for me, I was like, I kind of wanted to take the word of someone who's already done it before me and kind of have a different experience because, at the time, that security was very important for me. And, similar to Fania, when I had the chance to, see, okay, this is actually a reality that I could do this. It did take a couple meetings with Jesse for me to be like, I don't actually know, but as a first gen, mixed race individual with some, African ancestry, my first immediate thought was like, well, it'd be really cool to go to Africa, because I don't actually know that ancestry, but I would love to learn more about this culture. And so kind of bringing all of that together, knowing that it was an NGO that has had great experiences and had previous FSU Gilman scholars, and just getting the chance to work with, an area that I was interested in, and, doing sort of, that pre-medical work, pre-medical screenings for patients. It gave me the chance to, explore those ideas that, oh, okay, maybe there's more to just, studying for hard STEM classes and biology and chemistry. What is public health? What does it mean to learn about community health? And that kind of broadened the scope for me. So Ghana was where I originally went. And, I'd love to go back, but maybe in the future.
Yeah, I studied in Prague, Czech Republic, and we did the human rights program. And I think I just decided on it based on pure interest of like the topic itself of human rights. Not necessarily, I mean, of course, Prague itself is beautiful. But I think the program was the main deciding factor of where I was going and what program actually interested me, especially with international affairs. And my, I guess, relation, we're gonna bring it back to this being first gen, being Haitian. It's just like understanding history, context, all that, and how human rights kind of just works in just like a global space. It's just very interesting. So I think that's the main reason why I chose the program and experience and just being in the heart of Europe, which, plays its role. But I think it was just so worthwhile. And I feel like with figuring it all out, I went to the international programs office first and asked them, okay, how do I pay for it? Because I already know leaving the country, no one's going to pay for it besides me or scholarships or grants. That's it. And me is not included in the equation being broke. So I realized I missed almost all of the scholarships available at IP. So they were just like, you have to talk to ONF. And then that's kind of where we figured things out. And I was like, I'm no stranger to writing scholarship essays and stuff, but working with Jesse, wow, chef's kiss. That was an amazing, amazing process. And it really made it feel like this is even more tangible, having that support and going through it and being pushed to actually write clearer essays. And yeah, I hope that covered everything in the question.
So for my study abroad experience, I actually decided not to do a traditional study abroad, actual studying. I decided to do a research program instead. And my research program wasn't actually an official program. It was just through a lab that studied something that was of interest to me. And so I studied in Toronto, Canada at the University of Toronto. And the reason why I ended up there is because the University of Toronto is actually known for their memory researchers. There's a really big group of them. and I study memory. And so it was just kind of natural for me to end up there. And so I kind of let what I was interested in doing kind of decide where I would go. And also I had like a really nice connection with the lab that I was in. The PI, or like the principal investigator, he actually did his postdoc in one of the labs at the University of Toronto, which is the lab that I ended up in. And so he was able to put in like a good word for me. And so it's kind of just like where I could get in and what lab fit my interests the most.
What I really like about all of your experiences is that it does kind of represent the full spectrum of, you know, like what students can do from Fanya's, like, you know, it's a it's a program that is set, the curriculum is there. Of course, once your boots on the ground, it's gonna look very different depending on the things that you're interested in. To Sophie's on the complete other end was just like, let me build this myself. And we'll see how that works. And then Charles, like being in the middle is, okay, there's a lot of programs like Global Scholars is a great example where they help facilitate you finding the things that you care about, you know, but you have to kind of find it. Now, can all of you speak to maybe before you actually left, maybe what were some of those apprehensions that you had once you had decided on a program, you knew where you were going? What were some of the apprehensions that you have, and then what were some of the real challenges that you faced once you actually got there? How did you respond to those?
Fortunately with my experience, I think Global Scholars did a really good job of kind of not only helping with logistics and giving a sort of timeline of what needed to be done in order to get everything done. It also, the program prepared me to come in with an open mind of, you know, you're going for this experience, whether it's studying a project, a culminating experience, but you're only going to be there for, in the grand scheme of things, a very short period of time. So I was in Ghana for 9 weeks working with this NGO, and I knew that I wasn't going to, you know, be this savior. I wasn't going to solve all of the country's problems. I was merely there to have this experience. And if anything, I was going to be impacted more. So I came in with a completely open mind of what the experience was going to be, good, bad, and the ugly. And I was, you know, I kind of prepared myself to take it all in. And fortunately, other than the, you know, maybe 6 hours where I had food poisoning, the whole experience was a really great experience. You hear about things when you travel to certain places, you know, safety risks, you know, potential for obviously food poisoning. These are all real possibilities, but I think how you shape that perspective going into it is actually going to change the outcome later. And then, sorry, what was the second question, Jesse?
And so beyond apprehensions, what were like the real challenges that you faced? How did you meet those?
Okay, so I would say, yeah, the hardest part was once I finally got there, just getting things set up. Because once you know, for me, when I first got to Ghana, I knew that I was going to be meeting someone, and they prepare you, you know, don't take the first taxi that you see. So, you know, just kind of once I made that connection and actually being with the program director, you know, maybe it was establishing my international phone because I didn't have that, you know, immediately coming in, making sure that I had connection to people back home. Those were the hardest parts, I would say. But once I was there, and I had everything set, I knew where I was staying, I knew my schedule, you know, I knew the people I was going to meet and talk to. Everything else kind of just flowed. And I think I attribute a lot to kind of bringing those apprehensions down and coming in with that mindset.
Okay. I think for me, I didn't necessarily think too deep about the challenges that I was going to face, just being so young. So I was just mainly excited. Like, this is my first time leaving the country. This is my first time, honestly, being on a plane. This is, I think it was, how was I going to handle and learn through all of this? But I was very excited for it. I think the challenges that I did actually face were, was racism. I think being in the Central Europe where people don't often see Black people, it was very interesting navigating that, where it's like you're getting a whole bunch of stares all the time. You have little kids saying, "Oh my gosh, that's a Black girl." And you're just like, "Yup, I'm alive and I'm here. I am." And I think also what was challenging is because we didn't stay in Prague the whole entire time. We also went to Poland, we also went to Germany, and we toured a lot of the concentration camps and the museums. So even there, where it's like you're trying to learn about human rights, you're trying to learn about the atrocities that happen, but you're also facing racism while there. So while going through Auschwitz, there are multiple old white women who literally gave me the most disgusting looks, and I'm just like, okay. So I think it was balancing how I always think one, empathy, just balancing where it's just like, I understand your worldview. You don't necessarily get to experience things outside of what you know, outside of what stereotypes you probably heard. So I think it was a lot of me doing a lot of work on the back end all the time, constantly, but then trying to, Vanya, you're safe. You're doing the things you have to do. You're learning and you're kind of embracing the differences that are going on. So I would say that was probably the most challenging thing. Yeah.
So, unlike the others, I just went simply over a border and ended up in Toronto, which is like very close to like Buffalo, New York. So, culturally, it was very similar to like any big city in America. And so, my like challenges that I anticipated were more related to the challenges of any big city because I'm from like a really small town. And prior to moving to Tallahassee, um, it was like Tallahassee was the biggest thing for me. And um, so it was just like, how am I going to meet new people with all these people around? How will I deal with the noise of the city? I actually spent 3 months in Toronto, which is I think longer than normal, but so I was scared that I was going to hate it and then be there for 3 months. So, but actually didn't really find any of those things a problem. I actually got 4 roommates and we lived on a dorm on campus, and all my other 4 roommates were also doing internships. They all just happened to be like my age. And so we became really good friends. They're also like local to Toronto. So it was really easy for me to learn all the local things that people do because all of my roommates were just local to Toronto. But the actual challenges that I did face was because my program wasn't an actual program. I was the only person who was in my research lab who was like an intern or like a summer intern. And so I didn't have like a group of people like a normal program would to like kind of bond over. But that just like opened more opportunities for me to actually talk to the graduate students in the lab and the postdocs in the lab and kind of build relationships there.
Can all of you talk about now with this program in hindsight, how did you grow personally, professionally, or academically? Like what were some of the major gains from that program as it relates to where you are now? What are you studying or working in now? Can you kind of build those connections for us?
Sure. So while I was in Africa and Ghana, and actually to hit on Fania's point earlier, because I wanted to go back to that. So it's unfortunate that you experienced that, racism in Europe. But I would actually say that I experienced something similar in Ghana, because being in Ghana, there are people with a lot of darker complexion, but I was actually the lightest person there. So I also got a lot of experiences where, people were stopping and staring and saying like, at the time, I think the colloquial term was yevu, which is, the equivalent to white man. And again, being of mixed race, it's not the first time that I've experienced either, but it was a culture shock. So I think that was also an apprehension that now in hindsight, I kind of just blocked out because I was so, excited about the experience like you were. But I didn't really let it affect, my overall experience. But coming back to the current question, um, I springboarded my experience into working with Jesse again because it was such an awesome advisor. And I was like, you know what, I'd heard about Fulbright. Let me see if I can, swing and hit again. And we worked on a Fulbright application. The plan was to still get my master's of public health. And it was going to be at the University of Sheffield in Sheffield, England, with the Fulbright. So for anyone that is interested in doing Fulbright, Jesse is again a great advisor. But I advise that you look into what a previous Fulbright awardee might have been doing at that particular university, because unbeknownst to us, the person that did get accepted the year before was doing a very similar project. So it was a living learning experience for both of us. I was a semifinalist. Obviously, I did not get the Fulbright, but it was a great experience nonetheless. I still ended up obviously getting my master's in public health. And I was fortunate to use my Gilman experience to figure out what community health was, what epidemiology was, what global health was. And I just happened to start and right after graduation that fall. I finished in 2020. I got thrown into the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's been nothing but fun ever since. So I've bridged all of those experiences to where I'm currently at as an infection preventionist, still fighting infectious diseases, but now I'm at an acute care hospital. So all great experiences, but it was a very long-winded answer to your question. So I'll stop there.
I think personally, it like what I learned is just holding my own. Things are never going to go your way. You just kind of have to roll with the punches, really much like it adjusts, but you're always trying to figure out how is the best way to leverage the situation um in a way that, preserves your mental health. But I think same thing. Just going back and working with Jesse, I think I also did apply to Fulbright. I don't think I put my full might behind that. Uh, but I did apply to the pain fellowship when I was looking into master's programs, and I was a finalist, and I did my interviews in Washington, D.C. Although I didn't get the pain fellowship, which honestly, hindsight, I'm actually happy that I didn't. I think that was my first time in Washington, D.C., and I loved it. And I moved to D.C. So it kind of all the experiences like you said, they kind of all piece together to bring you where you are right now. So DC has been my home since graduating from Florida State. Yeah.
For me, I think I grew a lot academically and also personally. So personally, I learned a lot about myself. I didn't think that I would like living in a city, like I previously said, but I actually really enjoyed living in Toronto, and I really wanted to go to grad school in a big city, and I didn't end up there, but that's okay. Maybe after grad school. And I also am very introverted, but while I was there, I like still met a lot of people, and through that I've kind of been able to like learn like how to put myself out there to like make new friends. But academically, like I said, I was in a lab that studied memory, and currently I'm in a lab that studies memory, and I am studying memory. So obviously it had direct implications for what I'm doing now. It was also the connections that I made. So the lab that I was in is a very well-established lab. It's a very well-known lab. And so just having that connection definitely helped me in my graduate school applications. And then also I am still collaborating with some of the people that I was working with in my time in Toronto. Yeah, now I see them at conferences and we always make plans to do stuff. So
Charles, really quickly, I don't know if it's because I'm a Libra and I hold grudges. I've never forgiven the University of Sheffield, but that's another story. But what you all kind of touched on is that it's not always about the fellowship, you know, because Charles, you still went on and got your MPH. Fanya, you still went on and got your master's degree and you found the city that really resonated with you. And I mean, and Sophie, you're at Yale, you know, it's like there's always a silver lining here, but well, today we are talking about the fellowship because, you know, someone's got to get paid and we need to get there. So can you talk about, okay, the Gilman application itself, can you talk about what it really took in order for you to apply? And can you talk a little bit about the writing process? Because for many students, it's a really new type of writing.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted, once I had met with Jesse, that I wanted to, you know, I was already in Global Scholars. I wanted to go to Ghana. I, you know, made my choice of NGO. I think at that point it was, you know, just trying to put the pieces together and get there. Because I was supposed to go in summer, and I did go in summer of 2017, but at the time I was accepted to Global Scholars in the fall, and I still had to apply for Gilman by March. So, you know, I didn't actually, or I think it was October at this point. I can't remember the exact deadline, but I didn't have the money by the time that I was going to Ghana, and it was really, I was winging it. So I was like, you know what, whatever this guy tells me I gotta do, absolutely. And I remember Jesse would set a deadline, and there was a couple times where I was like, he's gonna be like, Charles, you're trash. But he never did. He was just like, yeah, I could tell that draft was, you know, kind of rushed, but you know, maybe put a little bit more into it next time. And it was the push that I needed, because you can't take shortcuts when it comes to these things, because as Jesse and Sam and Bonnie know, they've been reviewers. They can tell the authentic applications from the non-authentic applications. So the more effort you put into those scholarship essays, the more you're actually going to have the potential in getting this scholarship. And I think we met maybe every other week or every week, and it was a legit process. It was, I think it was, I wrote more during that span of time than I did for grad school in my grad school application. So it clearly paid off. And the thing that I tell everyone when it comes to this, you know, scholarship experiences, get an advisor like Jesse, and the sooner you go see them, the sooner you will have the chance of actually making this a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that you just said. I think the process, because I knew this was like my make or break, it's just like, okay, you have to take this seriously. You missed all the other scholarships just because you just didn't know. So if you are serious about this and you really want to study abroad, you actually have to try. And I think this kind of goes, before everyone joined, we were kind of talking about, you know, being mad when you're not instantly good at something. And I think working with Jesse, seeing all those red marks, and you're just like, well, you could try a little harder. And you're like, okay, I can. You're right. You're right. And kind of accepting that, you know, the editing process isn't like a bad note on you or the person you are or whatever. It's really just trying to make your writing stronger. So that editing process, I think that was the most important piece throughout the whole entire throughout the writing, and having somebody to tell you that you could be a little bit more vulnerable, you could make this a little bit stronger, having that coming from someone who is trusted, who isn't judging you, who isn't like, you know, being mean either, is really helpful. So it's that editing process, you kind of just carry that with you as you move forward and move along. So
So I had been working with Jesse on a few applications since my sophomore year. And so at the time when the Gilman scholarship was coming up, I was working with Jesse on the idea grant application, and then also a couple REUs, and it was like Gilman was a plan B to the REUs. But then I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and REUs are very structured, like they're a very structured research program. And I realized that I didn't want a structured research program. Instead, I wanted to do like an independent research program that was also a lot longer and also out of the country. So I decided I still applied to the REUs, but I didn't get any, but that's okay. But I just decided to do Gilman instead. So that's how I kind of came about to choosing to apply to Gilman. But the writing process is always and has always been like really hard for me. I think I'm a really slow writer. And so I feel like a week would go by and I would like write a paragraph, and it took me like 5 hours to write. Like it was a bit rough. So I always started really early on some of the applications because just like having to put my thoughts down on like paper is just, it's really hard for me. So yeah, always start early on anything, just in case you're also a really slow writer like me. But yeah, the thing that I found most helpful is just Jesse's feedback. At that point, I had already done like 5 or 6 applications, so I was used to all the red marks by then. So, but in the beginning, when I was first applying, I think the red marks really like struck me. I was like, wow, I'm a really bad writer. You know, like once you get enough red marks, they kind of get used to them. So yeah. So just like having Jesse help you through the application process really helped me. So
I have tried to switch colors, so it's not just red,
And also looking forward to the dinosaurs at the end of each application. I think that's something, a little nugget to hold on to.
Yeah, that's the secret, people don't know you get the dinosaur until you actually apply, so. Even everyone in this room today, you're in on the secret. Now, kind of both of you talked about, or all of you talked about, like, for Charles and Fanya, it was really, that was your first time. And so it was really kind of building from the ground up, and like, that is absolutely fine. Whereas Sophie, you had a couple years worth of work on this. And so your application process was a little bit more hodgepodge. Let's put some pieces you had already written together and continue to add to that. So wherever you're coming from, we're more than happy to work with you. But a quick pivot to one last question that I would like to hear some of your advice on before we turn it over to our attendees to ask question is, Fanya and Charles, this did not exist when you and I were working together, but from reviewing applications for this most recent Gilman cycle, it was the most deflating thing possible for me as a reviewer, which is you get a little portfolio of the applicant, you see who they are, where they're from, country they're applying to, and you see these profiles where it's like, oh, this student's applying to this study program in Zimbabwe, or they're applying to this, research opportunity in France, and then you open the application and it's an entirely AI generated essay. And it sucks because A, it's not good, but B, I have to evaluate this. And so Charles, neither you nor Fanya had, this software that was available to you, like all of your edits in Sophie, and did not, Sophie's writing was authentic. But it's like, what advice would you have for a student, that is now being tasked with, writing 3 or 4 or 5 pages, depending on the fellowship they're applying to, when it's high stakes, I need this money to go. And then you have the temptation of, some auto-generative software. Like, can you give me your thoughts on that and what advice you might have for students that are now navigating the Gilman process?
Yeah, so thanks for showing my age there, Jesse. No,
I'm right there.
No, I definitely think, like I mentioned before, you cannot take shortcuts when it comes to these scholarship essays. There are definitely tools to help with, grammar and, you know, those sorts of spelling things. And if, you know, English is not your first language, of course, you know, there's going to be certain things. But when it comes to the softwares now that are available, yes, they might, you know, seem like, oh, you know, I'm in a crunch. You know, this will give me the one up, you know, that it might, you know, get me to that. No, it's just not going to, because like Jesse mentioned, he was a reviewer. All of, you know, the people that have worked with Gilman and ONF at this point, who've been reviewers, can tell the difference. So, you know, and you also don't get the reward of, you know, the short-term instant gratification of like, oh, great, I put my idea into this AI software program and now I got this award. It almost shortchanges your experience because you didn't work to get there. So, you know, I really can't stress enough, like take the time. The red marks, they're not, you know, they're not bad. They're there as a motivator to help you to become a better writer. And you'd be surprised, like I said, it was harder for me during that process, but I became a better writer, and it's helped me in a number of other ways that I didn't think possible. So just, I guess my quip is don't shortchange yourself.
Okay. I'm thinking because I totally understand, you know, when it comes to time crunches and things like that, and I definitely know how COVID really affected people's ability to write, to comprehend, to read, honestly, to read as well. So I think, of course, I am not saying to use AI to build your whole entire thing and put trust in that. If it is something where you feel like you are having like, how do you use it best as a tool to give you a running start, but it doesn't take away the editing process? It 100% will not put you into your writing. I think for people who are just like, I have no idea how to start, you know, example of saying I could only write one paragraph in 5 hours, with in Sophie's case, like maybe I could have a running starting point, but that is just it. It is just a starting point, and then you working with someone who can tell, you know, what is AI and what's not, and how do you embed yourself and your real life experiences, your real life essence into this essay to reflect it. But I understand the use of it as a starting point, but I don't think it's something that's going to get you through the end. I don't really think it's rewarding. I'm also kind of against AI because I'm just like, the environmental problems that it's causing. So I try my best to stay away from it, but I think it's because I've learned how to write myself. I've learned how to do it with editing and stuff. So I don't necessarily need it, but I understand for the people who may, but it's not going to take away the editing process. That's 100% needed. So my advice is don't skip the editing process and working with someone. If you need a running start, understandable. There are tons of examples of writing samples or essays for the Gilman. So I think it's just using your resources and then putting your own life and essence into it afterwards.
I think for me, all of the applications that I have ever done, I've learned something new about myself. Especially the first few that I've ever done, like the Goldwater. That one took me like months, and I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about what I'm interested in doing, like my long-term goals. And you kind of lose all of that when you use AI. You lose the learning process of how to write, but also like learning more about yourself and about your interest and what you want to do. It's also like Jesse said, it's like really easy to tell what is AI and what's not, just because it's anything AI generated, it's like devoid of any personality and anything that like makes you a unique person, which in most cases isn't going to be favorable in like the application process, because usually reviewers like to see personality and they like to see that like who you are as a person. And so that can't come out when you use like something like AI. So.
And now we have still plenty of time for anyone in attendance today who would like to ask a question. Feel free to type it into the chat. Sam is monitoring that. Or unmute yourself. We have some fantastic people here today for at least the next 15 minutes or so. I have more questions if you're shy, but please don't feel free to ask.
All right, it looks like we have a question in the chat here. What year were you in when you began your application process?
I think 2017.
Yeah, I was in my third year of my time at FSU. It was the year right before my senior year, and my Gilman experience was the last summer that I had before I was graduating. So yeah.
Mine was also my junior year before, so in 2023 last summer. Yeah.
My sophomore year.
Yeah. It is open up until you graduate. And so I've had plenty of students that do it following their first year, and I have plenty of students that their Gilman experience is their last semester. They go during the summer and then they graduate. And so wherever you fall in between.
All right, we have, and this might be a longer response for a one-on-one meeting, but we have, what is Fulbright? And how does it work with Gilman? If you want to lightly touch on that, Jesse.
So IIE, it's the Institute for International Education. It runs and operates Gilman, Fulbright, Boren, the Critical Language Scholarship, Freeman Asia, and many other awards that all prioritize experiential learning abroad. That is, I think, the most simplistic way to say it. Fulbright is a postgraduate experience. So the earliest you could apply would have been in Charles's case and Vanya's case as a rising senior, because you apply the year before you would start the experience. So you apply fall of your senior year. It can be for an English teaching assistantship. It can be for a research program. It could be for a master's degree in Charles's case. And there's over 140 different countries I think are eligible. But Fulbright loves to see Gilman alumni pursue Fulbright. And so, if you can have a Gilman experience somewhere between your first and final year, and if you still want more, we should talk about, I mean, that's something Bonnie and myself and Sam, we're all currently working on Fulbright applicants. So all of these cycles kind of bleed into one another, but I hope that answers your question.
All right, we've got, can we set up an appointment to discuss possible internship programs, or is it better to have an idea prior to speaking with someone? And I am just going to quickly drop our email in the chat for anybody who wants to set up an appointment today as well.
But you do not need any other prior knowledge or expertise to come in and meet with us. It could just be like, I've had students that have sat down and they're like, my professor told me to come here. I don't know what you do. And so I'm like, all right, fantastic.
Everybody at ONF is a wealth of knowledge. It's so amazing. It's so good.
I regret that I didn't go there sooner.
All right, we've got, speaking of wealths of knowledge, what are some resources to find these research experiences abroad?
Reach out to me or the general email. I have plenty of links, and Bonnie does as well, because my advice is start with what is already structured at Florida State. So that is international programs like Vanya went through, global scholars like Charles did, global exchanges. There's also IIE Passport, Cash, other search engines to help you find an experience. Or you can be like Sophie and just build good relationships on campus with your faculty, and have a DIS or a directed individual study or a kind of build your own experience, anything in between. But my advice for students right now is to do not start the Gilman application, find your program. If you find your program, the application is going to be infinitely easier to approach.
Mhm.
All right, we've got a kind of specific question here. I'm a sophomore in the pre-nursing program and wanted to know how you think this would fit into my tight schedule. I should be applying to nursing school this upcoming spring, going in summer 2025. I wanted to know if it is even possible for me to study abroad with this tight graduation plan.
It's still possible. So the nice thing that Gilman changed probably about 5 years ago is they removed, because Gilman, it used to be your experience had to at least be like 3 weeks long. And now it is for programs of any duration. And so I have had students in the past that have found spring break programs. For example, Florida State has one called Beyond Borders with Global Exchange. There's an opportunity in Germany and one in Jamaica. And so you can, maybe part of your application is, I'm on this tight schedule before I start nursing school and I still want to have an experience, that is impactful to me. You may be able to find something related to nursing, or it could just be a cultural program. But I would recommend applying this October, because that would qualify you for anything that begins the start of spring up through the following year. And so anything that starts, I think, like January 1 through like September of the following year. That makes sense. So there is still time. We just may have to be creative in finding a program.
Awesome. We've got another question here geared more towards our panelists. How did you all cope with being away from family and friends for so long and essentially starting over in terms of creating new relationships?
It's a really good question. So once I established my telephone connection, I basically let my family members and friend and my girlfriend at the time, who's my now wife, what days or times I was going to be calling them if I had minutes, which I, fortunately did. I had data. So I would give them a call on Sundays, because that was going to be like the start. Monday I knew whatever the next day. So I would tell them about my experiences briefly, tell them I miss them and kind of, keep those long-term relationships. And then creating new relationships was really just whoever I met, I introduced myself, I don't describe myself as an extrovert. Some people might, but just kind of putting yourself out there and saying, look, you're only going to gain from this what you put into it. So I think that was really my experience, and it served me well.
Yeah. Definitely having those set times to talk to your family and friends is important, so people know. And then of course, I think it's kind of similar to college in general. If you did have left your hometown or you've moved away, it's kind of similar in that sense. But with creating new relationships, I would describe myself as an extrovert. I love people, unfortunately. Um, and so I always start with who's around me first, and you kind of just pick and choose. You know yourself and who do you think you're going to be friends with, who you're going to connect more with. So I think there's a discernment about, creating new relationships. It's who do you mesh with, but you have to give everybody an opportunity to see. So if my roommate, I chose the one room that had no other bedrooms in it because I'm like, I know I need my alone time. But within the people who were, who we shared rooms with, or shared, I guess, a little, I don't know, suite apartment with or whatever, you kind of gravitate towards different people. And they are like your support system. So it's really finding a mini support system, but that also doing things by yourself is really helpful too. Because in doing so, you'll probably meet somebody or someone, but I think it's a new relationship with yourself too. So I remember, even though this was my first time out of the country, I think our 2 free weekends during the study abroad, the first weekend I took myself to Paris for my birthday because I was like, why not? And I found one other girl who was willing to go on that trip with me, even though we don't know each other and it was only a week into the program. Why not? And then our second free week, there was a group of people going to Croatia. And I'm like, when am I going to ever go to Croatia? You just have to like take these opportunities. So I think it's really about discernment and being open to opportunities.
I like the others set up times to meet or call my family. And then I just like regularly text my friends from back home. But in terms of making new friends, I once again didn't have like other people in a program with me, so it was a bit more complicated, but thankfully having like 5 roommates gives you automatic friends. So if you do end up choosing a program that's not an actual program, try to get roommates. And mine happened to be local. And so anytime we would do something, they would invite their friends. So, and it ended up being like a really big group of people that would always hang out. And also I did spend a lot of time like exploring the city by myself, like without my roommates. And that, of course, led to new like friendships that I probably wouldn't have made if I just hung out with my roommates the entire time. And so having some alone time was definitely beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is like something to add in, but however you deal with rejection is probably really important to understand because you are in a new space. Not everybody has to accept you just because you came over there. So I think understanding how you react like emotionally to rejection, how do you bounce back, what is your recovery time, I think those are like really crucial aspects of just like being social, that can really help you in a new environment.
Thank you all for that. I know we're running low on time, but so if you do need to hop off, like, of course, please feel free. If anybody else has any other questions, I have one last quick one that I can always throw in. But wait, we do have.
It looks like we do have one last question here in the chat. It is, how do you find a program and what resources are available to research different programs available? Which I think we've touched on a little bit, but if you want to go a little bit more in depth with that.
Yeah, I can pull together, if you want to reach out to the ONF link, either myself, Bonnie, or Sam, like we can respond. I mean, it's not like here are all the possible things that you can look into, but I can at least give you a really good starting point to go to these websites and find a program. And if nothing on that works for you, then like, okay, that doesn't mean there's not anything out there, it just means we'll find something different. Start with resources at Florida State, move on to resources at other universities that had students that have applied to programs. Like, for example, UF has a really fantastic Portuguese language program. I've had students that have gone through their program. And then if nothing else, you can look for national opportunities that are open to any college student as long as you meet their criteria. So yes, thank you, Sam. So please reach out to the email and we'll get you some of those links.
I think with finding the course, I don't know if they still do the presentations in the classrooms, but the booklets, like the IP booklets, I think before I really sold myself on Prague, I flipped through that booklet and I just circled names or of places that I liked and narrowed it down. So I don't know if you're like a physical person too, try to find those pamphlets and booklets and just flip through.
I will say, maybe it doesn't seem that way because, I've been at Florida State a long time, Bonnie, I know you have as well, but it's easy to forget that Florida State, when we're talking nationally, like amongst American universities, Florida State has one of the best international programs office in the country, and international opportunities in general. The opportunities are really vast in terms of program type, countries that you are able to study in, faculty who are doing research abroad. I've had students that have literally just traveled with their PI to go to a dig site, like in Italy, and so it's just like literally the craziest things that you can find. I'm sure Florida State has it, and if they don't, then we'll find the backup plans. Yeah, just grab a book that I'm fine with it. One last quick question that I had, that often trips students up when they first try to write about it is in the new essay 2, which focuses on, serving as a citizen diplomat abroad and representing quote unquote America. A lot of students haven't had to write about that before, and unfortunately, if you read the news on a daily basis, it's like, what new horror are we approaching today? But can you speak to how you would even approach that essay and talk about the role that you play the moment you leave the country? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can't remember specifically what I said in my essay, but I knew when I went to work, with the ONF office and Jesse, I think it was kind of figuring out what my personal reason for going to that country was, as well as the program that I was doing, and how I was going to, like Jesse said, represent, FSU, Florida, the United States, and more so not necessarily, tell people what my goal is per se, but how I would embody my experience while being there, and kind of, basically helping with that international cultural exchange, right? Because that's ultimately what you're going to do when you go on any sort of international experience. It's an exchange. You're going to learn something, they're going to learn something. So I think your ability to know who you are, and you will figure out who you are when you're on this experience, but how you are able to tell people why you're here, what you hope to gain, and what experience you hope to gain from them, what you hope to learn. I think that's going to kind of answer the question of how you represent, America per se. Because like Jesse said, there's a lot of things going on in the world right now, and there's always going to be, things going on. But keeping it positive and, keeping that light, I think is what will help you through that experience.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent. Being first generation American, I feel like that's been a challenging thing, is considering myself American. I've always considered myself Haitian, just off bat, no Haitian American, but that was, I think, once I started, college applications and things like that, I had to kind of put those two together and kind of get a little bit more comfortable with that term. Because I still, even though I may work for district government, I don't know if I necessarily would consider, controversial, sorry, apologies in advance to whom this may offend. I don't necessarily see myself as a representative of America. I see myself as a representative of Haitians. And fortunately, I'm able to use and leverage the tools that being in America gives me. And I think that in itself is very much American, using the tools around you to kind of leverage and push yourself forward. And the most important thing, I guess, this is another one of the essays, is like that cultural impact, that community impact that you're going to have, and just how do you use those tools to give back to others. So with me studying abroad, I'm not sure if, like the people around me knew that was available to them afterwards, and all of my friends and stuff who had questions of like, oh my gosh, you did this or you did that. I think it's just really leveraging opportunities in the way that you spin it. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
So for my essay 2, I think I wrote about what makes like doing research unique. And I believe I also wrote about like a recent act that was passed about like the United States and Canada wanting to do like more science together, which was so perfect. So I used that as like the prompt. And so I kind of tied it as being like a representative of what it would mean for an international collaboration between like Canada and the United States, like what that would actually look like. And so that's what I talked about. But I think finding like the unique aspects of your program and also about your interest and why you're interested in the program that you're doing. And then kind of tying that essay around that, which is definitely really hard, but it is possible.
Awesome. Well, those are all the questions that I had for today. And so thank you so much to all of you for joining us today and sharing your insight and wisdom with the students that are in attendance and the many others that registered for this recording. And so these are always some of my favorite presentations that I get to do on any yearly basis, because selfishly, y'all are some of my favorite students that I've worked with and I get to see with you. But also, I know you are extremely wise and your insight is really helpful for our students. So thank you all so much.